Welcome to the Cathedral of Shadows, where demons gather.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Cathedral of Shadows, a Megami Tensei podcast. I am Rasen.
I'm Katsu.
And I am Kevin Frane, and I am the translator of Quantum Devil Saga Avatar Tuner Volume 1.
Oh wow, we actually got someone that's really important on our podcast finally. Woo.
Yay!
No offense to anyone that was on here previously or anything, but this is awesome. So
I'm excited to be here.
it's really awesome. We couldn't believe that we were able to get you on. It's honestly
Yeah,
an
I
honor.
know.
Yeah.
This podcast has come a long way.
Yeah, it has. The 5 months we've been doing it. So we prepared a series of questions for you, Kevin.
Sure, no problem. And hey, the 5-month mark, if you can get past the 3-month mark in a podcast, I think that's when you really start to see things pod fade. So if you stuck with it for almost half a year, that's a good sign.
I know, that's awesome. I mean, it's so weird because
Well,
I go back and listen to the early crap, and then I'm like, wow, we sucked, but we've improved,
Yeah.
so that's awesome.
I've never known a podcast that didn't suck when it first started, so don't worry about it.
That's so true.
Hmm?
Oh, man. All right, so we're not going to answer emails this episode. I thought we'd spare Kevin the pain of our listeners' questions. So we're just going to go all interview for this entire thing. So I guess we're just going to get right into it. So the first question we prepared for you is, how would you describe your job?
So I'm a freelance translator, and basically what that means, for those of you who don't know, I'm an independent contractor. I work for a number of clients and agencies, and basically, I establish rapport with folks, and when they need something translated, I am one of the people that they will go to. Specifically, I focus on video games. That's my big area of focus. I was a video game producer for 6 years, working at Sega, but I moved on to freelance translation, and it's interesting because you never know what's going to come next. Projects will very often come out of nowhere, sometimes with as little notice as, hey, later today we have a thing coming in that's going to take you the next 2 weeks. Can you do that? And that's good, because when you're a freelancer, anything that pays you money and falls into your lap without you having to look for it is a good thing.
Definitely.
Oh man, that sounds hectic.
You said you work for Sega?
I used to. I worked for Sega between 2004 and 2006. I was specifically I was a localization producer.
Nice.
So if you look in the credits of any Sega games that were released during that period, you will see my name.
Ooh, that sounds
Oh, not
awesome.
bad.
Could you list any games in particular that you worked on, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So like earlier on, let's see, I did Shining Tears. I don't know if any of you played that. That was an older, it was an action RPG based on the Shining series. I was the producer and translator I was the translator for Feel the Magic XYXX.
That's the DS game, right?
Yes, it is. And
All right.
I was the producer and translator for the sequel to Rub Rabbits. I did a bunch of translation for Phantasy Star Online Blue Burst, Phantasy Star Universe.
Oh, wow.
I was the producer and translator for Knight's Journey of Dreams on the Wii. Sonic Rush Adventure. What else? I was the producer for Yakuza 1, 2, and 3. But
really?
I wasn't the translator on those.
Oh.
But I did get to do the voice direction for at least the first one, which anyone who's familiar with the history of the Yakuza series will know how the English voice track for that game was regarded. But
All right. That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. So yeah, you definitely got a lot of history and credentials to you. That's awesome.
yeah, I have street cred, so if anyone's hopefully that assuages anyone's worries about, like, hey, who did they give Avatar Tuner to? At least it's somebody with a history in video games.
That also means
Yeah.
if any of our listeners, for whatever reason, need a translator, no.
There you guys need a translator.
I will warn you, I don't come cheap. I've had people come to me like, hey, like, can you translate this manga or this doujinshi for me? And I'm like, yeah, sure, and I'll go and look at it, and I'll cite them like a rate, and they're like, ooh. And I was kind of hoping that there would be a friend discount. I'm like, that's with the friend discount.
Oh my god, that is awesome.
Not bad.
You know, I never thought of that, but yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that, especially that are into the whole Japanese scene, that, hey, I want this translated. Let's look for everyone that could possibly get this done.
Yeah. A lot of people don't seem to realize that, like, asking me to do my day job for free is kind of not cool.
Yeah.
Like, oh, heck, I have this little thing. Like, can you just translate this? I'm like, that's gonna take me like 4 hours. Like, are you gonna pay me by the hour to do that? Like, this is work where I come from.
Oh man, that's awesome. So I guess we'll move on to our second question. How did you get involved with the Quantum Devil Saga project?
So that's actually an interesting question. In it again, like I mentioned, sometimes projects come out of nowhere. This is one such instance where, as you and some of your listeners probably know, this is being translated by Bento Books, which is a smaller outfit, but they've got some pretty exciting titles out there. I know that their Math Girl series is apparently doing pretty well. But one of my fellow translator friends, Nick DeBar, came to me, and Alex Smith, who is the guy in charge of Art Bendo, like they say, hey, like, he needs some help with one of these projects. Do you mind if I put you in touch with him? And I was like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead. I'm greatly in need of a large project right now, so go ahead, put me in touch. And coincidentally, my path had briefly crossed with Alex back when I had been working at Sega years ago. In the form of he and my boss at the time had been working on something together, and he did actually remember me, and we looked over my credentials, and long story short, I appeared to have been a good fit for the Avatar Tuner project, and that's sort of how I wound up kind of getting pitched headfirst into this.
Not bad.
It's one of those things.
Yeah.
I was the right person in the right place at the right time. So
Yeah, they kind of.
So you said.
Oh, you can go ahead.
So you said you crossed paths with Atlas before?
Oh, with Alex. Sorry, Alex.
With Alex.
Yeah, Honcho over at Joe Books.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that kind of. You said before that stuff pretty much falls into your lap. That seems like another case of that then, huh? Where, guess I'm doing Avatar Tuner, huh?
Yeah, no, I certainly did not expect to wind up in novel translation, but now that I'm involved with it, it's something I'm hoping to keep into. I'm finding it very rewarding. We can get into that later when you're starting asking the meat of the questions about what that's all like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to not like, oh, I just lucked into this translation gig. I mean, I do have like a decade of experience in professional translation in the video game industry, so I mean, it's hopefully it makes it seem like less of a shot in the dark. Like, oh, this random person like wound up with this. It's like
who are you? What's your story?
Storm. Yeah, I mean, like they needed someone to translate it. I was available. It's like, oh, hey, you'll be a really good fit for this. And I was like, all right, cool. Let me look it over. And I did. And I'm like, yeah, I can tackle this. And then it was suddenly super intimidating because I'm like, holy jeez, I have to translate an entire novel.
That sounds like the interesting challenge. I think we'll move on to the third question. Speaking of Bento Books, how has working with them been so far? Has it been positive?
Oh, they're great. They're great. They're very one of the things I really like, which is a great thing for any translator, is that they're content to leave all of the creative decisions to me. They don't do a lot of micromanaging. They started out with, okay, like send us some samples of your work and what you can do so that we can see, okay, like, are you actually a good match for your project? Do you have a style that we like? And thankfully that was the case. So they're like, yeah, okay, we trust you. Go ahead and do this. Give us updates if anything's on the fence with that. And in the meantime, all the contact I've had with those guys has been great. And there's possibly some other stuff on the horizon. But I'm living. I can say I'm certainly looking forward to working with them more in the future if they'll have me. So I guess that implies it's been great. They've been very, very supportive, and I'm really delighted that they've given me this chance to branch in my career like this.
I've looked around their website and stuff, and they seem really dedicated too. Like they seem pretty
Yeah.
small, but they seem like they really want to get going on just translating all this stuff.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if anyone out there, because I keep name dropping Alex Smith. Professionally, I think he goes by Alexander O. Smith. And if you want to look him up and look at his localization resume, he's a heavy hitter. He's a big name. Like people know him, and there's a lot of projects out there that I think your listeners would be familiar with that he put his name on.
Yeah, I was I'll link to his page actually down below. I was looking around through that, and yeah, there's the Final Fantasy stuff. I think Tactics Ogre, a lot of big name stuff that he worked on.
Yeah, he did. He did like Final Fantasy X. Was one of his.
Oh
big,
wow, Final Fantasy X, not bad.
Yeah.
That's my favorite game right there.
Yeah,
Brownie points for Katsu.
Yes.
Oh man. So yeah, definitely a lot of experience behind Bento Books, it seems. So that's great, especially with how I don't want to really use the term indie, but I guess that kind of suits it. They seem pretty small, but I really hope that they get quite the big following, because what they're planning on doing with all these various novels and mangas and stuff is just so amazing, and I'm so happy that someone out there is working on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's a niche market, but somebody has to do it. There's a demand for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad that they are.
I'm glad that they are too.
Get more
I'm
work.
happy to be involved with it.
So I guess we'll move on to the fourth question. Have you played any of the Megami Tensei games, or are you a gamer in general?
I'm definitely a gamer. I can't have worked in the video game industry for a decade without being a gamer. And I cut my teeth on the Atari 2600 as a kid, and I've come all the way up through today. So before anyone bites my head off, unfortunately, the only one of the MegaTen games I played is actually Persona 3.
Okay.
Although I did quite like it, but I'm familiar with the series, and I'm certainly very familiar with Digital Devil Saga at this point. And it's one of those things that's not like I don't have interest in playing the games, although that's certainly become more of a priority now. I want to try to make the time to do that. Just when you work in professional video gaming and professional translation, you're very busy a lot of the time. You don't necessarily have a lot of free time, and the last thing that you want to do when you get home is to like sink your time into an 80-hour RPG.
Yeah, that's understandable. That's very understandable.
Persona 3.
Yeah.
Oh man. So have you been playing anything recently?
Recently. Wow, I'm trying to think of what the last. Actually, the last game I've been playing a lot of, and this is going to sound silly. Have you heard of a game called Super Amazing Wagon Adventure?
No, but that sounds awesome.
It's
That
like
sounds amazing.
It's like a cross between Oregon Trail, Gradius, and WarioWare.
What?
You can get it on
Okay.
Steam. It's on Steam, and it's on the Xbox Live Indie Arcade. It's like $1.
That sounds amazing.
It's probably the best dollar I've ever spent on anything in my life, or at least in recent memory. It's hilarious. It's like a randomly generated like schizophrenic shooter, except you're a wagon. And I don't want to give away too much, but it is a brilliant little bit of insanity, and I think that it's worth taking like a half hour, an hour for folks to shout, and not like you have a high cost to entry.
Okay, so we've established that you're quite the gamer then. That's awesome. So, I guess there's a lot of people out there that get really defensive about game stuff being handled by non-gamers, but honestly, I think, if you got the translation and you got the knowledge behind the series and the lore and stuff, like it seems like that's all that really matters at the end of the day, but there's this weird sort of stigma with it, but
Indeed.
Well, I would say that it's worth mentioning that you do need to respect the audience. You need to respect the fans. And having someone who's completely ignorant of that, you could potentially wind up with a product that they're not going to appreciate as much. And certainly, if I were managing editor of a localization firm and I had two people with equal jobs, but one of them was a gamer and one of them wasn't, I mean, in that case, like that's a pretty good tiebreaker.
Okay, so, that's interesting. I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, I guess it is a case of respecting the audience.
Yeah,
So,
and
Yeah.
it's not to say that like, oh well, if you're not a gamer, like, oh well, we would never want you to translate this book if you don't know your video games, because uh, and we'll probably get into this later. Quantum Devil Saga is a unique case in that regard. Um, but yeah, it's like you said, you can see it going either way. I think it's an arguable point.
yeah.
I mean, I'm certain that most of the listeners here are probably happy to hear that I have industry experience.
Oh, definitely.
Oh yes.
Um,
MegaTen fans are probably some of the most passionate people around,
I
and
I have I have discovered that in my time on the internet.
yes,
oh man.
if you mess
I
with their
understand you guys
games or
have.
their franchise, there will be
I
blood.
understand that you guys have a big problem. Like, there's like a schism between people who only play Persona games and people who play everything.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Yes. We have
we had
talked
an
many
entire
hours
episode.
about this. Yep.
We had an episode about that. Oh my god.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it's quite stupid to be frank, but yeah, there's a lot of passion involved with this series and its fan base. Oh man. Um,
And then
moving
there's
on.
that whole article about like the Persona music getting copyrighted. Oh man, that was a mess.
Yeah, ooh, it's definitely it gets crazy at points, but that's why I love it so much.
The
Yes.
many-headed Hydra that is the Megaten franchise slash franchises. But the branding is all weird because, like, in Japan you have games that aren't strictly Megaten, but like they have like the Shin Megami Tensei name when they localize them
yeah,
over into the US, and
Yeah, they did that in
Digital
order
Devil
to
Saga.
strengthen.
Well, yeah. Well, no, because it over here it strengthens
Yeah,
brand identity.
yeah,
yeah, there was no such thing as like a Shin Megami Tensei anything until Nocturne. And if they didn't stick with like putting Shin Megami Tensei on all of the Megaten games, SMT4 probably wouldn't have sold as well.
yeah. That's true though because they're starting to drop it now, or at least ease up on it. It seems like, but yeah, it definitely seems like a case where they kind of needed to here just to strengthen the brand.
Yeah, and I think it's probably part of where the Persona crowd comes in, because they've definitely de-emphasized the Shin Megami Tensei connection on the Persona games. I never hear anyone refer to it as like a Shin Megami Tensei colon Persona 3 or Persona 4.
Yeah,
And I mean, in
Yeah,
Japan, of course, it's not, but
yeah. It's so weird because it's like at the end of the day, it's just games, people. Like we don't need to like slaughter anyone over which games they like over the other ones and what people play. It's so silly. Um,
one of my favorite pieces of internet advice is that it's okay to not like things that other people do. Just don't be a dick about it. Like, no one like is gonna hold a gun to your head and make you like something. It's a matter of personal taste.
that's up there with the XKCD comic strip where it's just a sick man at his computer. Then off screen you see like a speech bubble going, "Honey, why are you up so late?" And then he just cuts to the guy and he says, "Because someone on the internet is wrong and I need to correct them."
And I think that's a trap that all of us have fallen into at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
Um, it's a lot easier to defend like viewpoints and like get into arguments with someone too, especially when there's no face to face like communication going on.
because you have
Yeah.
more ink and more, and there's no threat of getting slapped in the face.
Katsu, if
There
I
have been
ever meet
times
you in
where
real
I've
life, I'm not arguing with you. Don't want to be slapped.
like there have been plenty of times where there have been people that I've known online. Oh, this person's a tool and whatnot. And then like I'll be at a convention and I'll meet them in real life. It's like, oh, you're actually incredibly pleasant and fun to hang around with. Who knew?
Who knew?
Who knew that when you robotically dehumanize someone, it's harder to emphasize with them?
Oh man, the
Yeah.
only time I ever met someone that like I knew offline was actually really weird because they recognized my voice and I hadn't talked to them in like 2 years, and I didn't remember who they were. So it was really awkward. Oh man,
You're like, hi, question
well,
mark.
it was really weird because I used to play competitive Call of Duty and just FPSs in general, and he recognized me because I was one of like the little like leaders for that, and he recognized me.
Oh,
He's
okay.
like, "Oh, you're Rasen." I'm like, "How do you know who I am?" Like,
Who are you?
it was really
my
That is
awkward.
name.
pretty incredible, actually. I don't know if I'd be able to pick out somebody's name from like TeamSpeak or whatever. That's impressive.
I know, like, I had no clue, and then he's like, "Oh yeah,
Some
I'm."
savants right there.
I know. I was like, "Oh, I'm XX420 sniper," like whatever his gamer tag thing was, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like,
Oh, hi.
oh man, it was a strange experience. Anyways, we should move on to the next question. This is fifth question. How close are the novels to the plot of the game? This I kind of want to talk about because there's a lot of, it seems, misinformation on the internet where some people say that it's kind of like a director's cut version. Some people say it's just a straight up adaptation. Do you want to set the record
Right.
straight for everyone here?
So I was listening to one of your earlier episodes where you were actually talking about this, and you had correctly pointed out that this is not a novelization of the games. And in fact, the author herself, stresses in the afterword, don't think of this as novelizing the Digital Devil Saga series. This is her story. So there's some of the backstory just to cover where she was invited by Atlas to help write the story for this game, and then due to health issues and a few other factors, she wound up having to leave the team. But her contract did allow her to keep the novel rights for her story, and it took about 10 years of work on her part to finally get everything together. But so one of the big things here is that it's less, I don't know if I call it director's cut so much more as like a vision, which is, I guess, is a splitting hairs, but it's a it's a subtle, but it's a difference that's probably worth noting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because that's very exciting too to people because I've seen a lot of people saying like, "Oh, I don't care for adaptations of games and stuff just because I've played the game and all that." But if there is a notable difference, I mean, that's pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Well,
I want to see the original vision. I want to experience that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly, as a translator, when I first was put on this project, I was a little dubious. I'm like, oh, like I have to translate a video game book. I'm like, and I'm just like going through this. I'm like, I don't want to have to be going. It's like, and then he is Maragi dying, and I'm just like, but it's nothing like that, thankfully. Um, but
Oh
as
man.
far as
Speaking of the spells and stuff, are you using the official Atlas translations of those?
um, no, and there's a reason for that. Is that actually Atlas doesn't have anything to do with this, which
Okay.
is another point that has gotten lost. No, this is all just the work of Yugo Dai and the publisher Hayakawa Books. Um, this is I guess is considered her own intellectual property, and the way that it's working, at least insofar as Volume One goes, none of the MegaTen specific terminology has even come up.
Oh, that's interesting. I never
Oh,
knew that.
Yeah.
So, are the character names the same or
Yes. So the character names are the same.
okay.
It's the same, and the beginning certainly Volume One here, very closely equates to. So this book is going to be with this coming out, Volume One, which is the one that I've at the tail end of finishing up. It roughly equates to about the first half of Digital Devil Saga One.
Okay.
Um, but even then, there are some noticeable differences. Um, and I don't want to get too many spoilers for people who haven't played Digital Devil Saga or who don't. Well, how do you guys feel about spoilers? Like,
We
how much do you want
we
me to tease?
um here, I'll say this. For the first 3 episodes of this podcast, we try to be as spoiler free as possible, and then like I ruined the ending to like 5 games throughout like the 5 months that are prior to this recording. So yeah, go a spoiler.
Okay.
Spoil as much as you want.
So I won't get into any of the big spoilers. I'll get into an early spoiler just to sort of show just how different
Okay.
this is from the game. So the cute little black-haired girl who she sings her happy song to soothe the savage beast.
Yeah.
That's sort of how that works in the games. In the novels, the way that this happens the first time that she shows up while all the Embryon members are stuck in Atma form and they're going berserk, instead of singing a song, she takes her fingernails and she slits her own wrists and feeds them her blood. And that's
Oh, wow,
that's
edgy.
the trigger thing. Yeah, no, it's actually a really gory, violent book, which maybe that excites some people. But there's a definite element of body horror to all of this. And so yeah, the big plot point is, for this first book is okay, how do we handle, using, this girl's blood to keep our demons in check?
That's interesting.
And there's this moral quandary, Argilla in particularly is really upset, are we just gonna keep drawing blood from her and putting it into tools, and that's the only way we're going to be able to get by?
Oh man.
And towards the end of the book, I won't ruin this because it's actually a huge spoiler, and it would with the in the book. But I will say that since I was familiar with how Digital Devil Saga went story-wise, I'm getting up toward the end of this book. There was a scene I wasn't looking forward to doing because it was something that I was I don't want to have to do this. This is going to be a drag. And then it did a complete 180 from the game, and I was having heart palpitations while I was reading the Japanese. I'm no way. I'm no, they're not going to do this. Oh my god, they are! And I got so excited. And so it leads me to believe that there's probably going to be major divergences later on in the series.
Okay.
I will confess I haven't read all 5 of them yet.
Okay.
It's because I've I haven't had time. I've been stuck on the first one, doing all my translation and editing all this time. But I'm certainly going to read them now because I'm kind of hooked on it.
All right. That brings us right properly into our 6th question. Are you enjoying the process of translating this novel?
I am. So another point of note, which I should have mentioned this earlier, I actually have 3 novels published in English. I've written my own original novels a few times now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I guess is probably another part of how I got the contract through Bento Books. Oh, he's a translator and he's a novelist and he does video games. This is one of those at once. God.
That's awesome.
I will say one of the good things about translating a novel as opposed to writing one on my own, I don't need to worry about whether or not the story sucks. Because A, I can't change it, and B, well, somebody paid money for it already, so at least it's at least that good that it was worth paying in the first place.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun. It's a very, very different experience from translating video games. Just with Japanese narrative prose and just the structure. It was really awkward at first just because I had never quite done anything like it. But I fell into a groove pretty early on, and I think probably the best word to put it, it's been very rewarding. I feel like this is a really interesting step in a direction for my career to take. I'm definitely interested in more double translation after this, and it's fun. I feel like sort of a sense of ownership. This is my baby. I'm really looking forward to this coming out, and I'm all right, yeah, Quantum Devil Saga. All right, I helped make that happen. And
That's
the fact
awesome.
that it's part of a series that people are already looking forward to. They're already familiar with the source material. It's sort of oh wow, I'm really looking forward to seeing how people respond to it, and how and if they like it. Just some of the teasers I gave you guys just now, you seem pretty excited by that.
Oh man, I'm so excited.
Oh, man.
As soon as they announce the
So
release
stoked.
date, I know I'm marking that on the calendar.
Yes.
I can say the plan is for the summer,
All right.
which I know be patient.
Yeah.
It will happen. Let me put it this way: my at the time of this recording, my manuscript submission line is in exactly a week, so it's going one way or the other.
All right.
You actually picked me up at a good point because I'm still technically in the middle of it, but I'm right at the tail end. So my head is still in translating, editing, mind space.
That's good.
But I've had most of the experience already.
Okay, so since you just said you were in the middle of it technically, well, you're reaching the light at the end of the tunnel. Let's put it that way. Have any unique challenges come up during the translation process?
Several actually. So I should point out when I say that I'm not quite done yet, like the full novel has been translated already. Like I finished the main translation a while ago, and I've been going back and just re-editing it and retranslating it just to make it flow better. When you're translating between two languages for several hours a day, it becomes this weird, like, unnatural mix of both languages. So you sort of kind of approach it as like a creative writing exercise afterwards to polish it up. Like, okay, like I made the book into English. Now I'm gonna go through it again and make it into good English. But there have been some unique challenges here. Like the first and foremost was okay. Figure out what aspects of the book are original to the book and versus things that are from Digital Devil Saga that I'm just not personally familiar with. Because like I'm pretty familiar with the plot, the story, and the characters of the game, but as I said before, I haven't actually played the games, which was actually something I was encouraged not to do. Because they asked, like, have you done that? Have you played the games? I'm like, no. I'm like, do you want me to? They're like, actually, you probably shouldn't. Like, we want you to approach this, as if it's its own thing.
Really?
But it's then again, at the same time, as I pointed out, I wanted to respect the audience. So I was like, well, okay, I at least want to be familiar with, what is the audience going to expect. So that was the thing, and because I was like looking online, I'm like, okay, like how does Digital Devil Saga cosmology work? Like, because they're talking about how, okay, like when somebody dies, they turn into the rain, and then like is this in the game? Like, is there like a description of this somewhere so I can can I wrap my head around this? But
It's so true because Digital Devil Saga, we talk about this a few times. Digital Devil Saga's world and just like the lore and stuff is so out there in comparison to the other Megami Tensei stuff, which is already pretty out there. It's definitely pretty crazy. Like people eating each other, turning into demons. It's definitely crazy.
No, it is weird. I think the best description I heard of Digital Devil Saga was from one of my friends who said it. He said it takes place in the techno-Hindu land. And
it's pretty accurate.
I think that's a succinct way to put it, which leads, you were mentioning, okay, what are some of the unique challenges? One of the big ones was I had to look up a lot of Sanskrit. Because there's a lot of Sanskrit terminology based on like all of like the stuff with like the Karma Temple and all of like their religious doctrine. There's a lot of terminology that comes from Hinduism and Vedic mythology, and it's all this Sanskrit stuff. But it's Sanskrit words that have been rendered into phonetic Japanese in katakana, and so now I'm like, okay, I have to sort of back figure out what word this is supposed to be, and then go figure out what it is in Sanskrit, so I can figure out how you're supposed to write that in English.
In English.
Right. Man, that sounds like a process.
Yeah. So like I know a bunch of weird Sanskrit terminology now after having translated this.
Oh man.
Not bad.
Never know when that'll come up in your life.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like a lot of it was stuff I already knew, just because by sheer coincidence, one of the novels that I've already released, it's called The Seventh Chakra, and so obviously I had to know all the chakra terminology when I wrote that, but the names of all the areas in the junkyard are all named after the seventh chakras. So I came across those. I'm like, oh hey, I know all this already.
That's good.
Muladhara, Svadhisthana, and all those happy fun things.
Okay.
Which look really weird when you write them out in Japanese.
So this is our 8th question. You've kind of already addressed this. Has Atlas helped out in any way with the translation?
Atlas America or Atlas Japan?
No, they have not been involved in the project at all. Although for a lot of. I mean, I had a terminology sheet, based on I had like terminology sheets for Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2, and I had one for Nocturne, I think.
Okay.
That like somebody had put together, like, okay, like if you come across anything that might resemble this, go for it and check that out. And
I'm sorry to cut you off, but if I ask why Nocturne specifically, is there anything from there that pops up, or is that too much info?
I think the only reason that Nocturne was, I think, because that was the first big release in the U.S., but that was where a lot of the English terminology was established,
Oh,
and
okay.
so
Oh, okay.
that's where that came from.
Okay, yeah,
Uh,
that's true because a lot of the PS1 games and stuff like that use their own weird little translations that haven't stuck. So, yeah, that makes
yeah.
sense.
So, but as I pointed out, as it turns out, there's not really a lot of Megaten specific terminology that shows up in the book, so it sort of became a non-issue.
Okay.
Um, where it did come in, though, is I kept all of the main character names I rendered the same way as they are in the Digital Devil Saga games in English. So all the members of the Embryon. We've got the Surf, Argilla, Gale, Salo, Heat. I didn't change any of those.
Okay.
Um, I kept Janana's name the same, even though that's technically a Sanskrit mistranscription. Like there's not supposed to be an I in Janana. It's
Oh,
like a Sanskrit term. It means like wisdom or something, but it looks and flows weird in English without the I think, and so I just left that as is.
okay.
Okay.
Just keep people familiar. Mick the Slug was another one that I have thus far kept. I might change that. If anyone doesn't know, in Japanese it's Mick the Nick, and I don't know for sure why that was changed in English, but I'm guessing it probably has to do with the fact that it sounds like it should be racist. Like I don't know what I don't know
Oh.
I don't know what it would be racist towards. It just sounds like calling something like a Nick. Like is that a something? Like, I don't even know. Like yeah, so
Yeah,
that's one of those things where I'm not sure. Just it doesn't sound good in English. I'll put it that way.
yeah. I know a lot of our fans and listeners and stuff are gonna really appreciate that. Something I've talked about when talking about Quantum Devil Saga previously is there is a Gundam novelization like of the original series that came out a while back, and at the start of the novel, like for one of the first early issues, I mean, of the translated novel, the guy flat out says, "Now I know there's proper names that have been localized in the actual series and stuff, but I'm not going to use any of them." And it's
Oh,
like that's a little odd towards something that like fans specifically are going to buy. It's kind of weird that you wouldn't use at least some of the names and stuff that have already been established here. So that's really great that you're keeping it as close as possible. A lot of people are going to
yeah.
appreciate that.
There are a couple of changes. For some of the Atma names, there were some, I don't know if they were like mistransliterations of the Sanskrit. But so, like, for Surf's Atma, which is, it's supposed to be Varuna, and it was originally localized as Varna without
Yeah.
the U. And Argilla as well with Prithivi instead of Prithvi. Those are the two big ones that I did go and change just because the book makes it very explicit. Like these are the names of Hindu gods, and Hinduism is a real religion that real people living today practice. And I thought about that, and I'm like, intentionally misspelling the name of important religious figures just because a video game did it first seems like ignorant at best and actively offensive at worst.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I felt justified and like, okay, well, I'll
I think that
tweak
was
that.
probably like the same thinking when they localized Digital Devil Saga. They probably changed some of the names to be culturally sensitive, I guess, but in a way that's kind of odd since Atlas has been known to not be culturally sensitive. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's also only some of them because a lot of the Atma were translated just fine. Like Agni, Vayu, and Dios. Those were all spelled normally. But again, this is what happens when we were talking about things. If you take something in Sanskrit, then bring it through Japanese, and then bring it into English, you're gonna get stuff jumbled up.
Yeah,
And
that's
again, I
true.
can't,
Yeah, that's probably
I
what
can't
happened.
speak for as to whether that was an intentional choice on the original localization's part, or if it was just like a slip up that nobody caught because people working in a
And there was a
localization
lot of
office in
text.
America know their like.
That seems like an easy mistake to make, honestly. Like, you're dealing with three different
Absolutely.
languages. Like, that seems like something that could get through. So,
3 different languages, the volume of text, terminology, and all that stuff. Yeah.
um, all right, I guess we'll move on to.
Worth pointing out actually that Yugodai herself makes some misspellings
Okay.
in the sense, like the Om Mani Padme Hum. She repeatedly misspells that, so I'm like, well, I'll just fix that in the translation because I know how it's supposed to be spelled. Um, but again, that's her writing it in English
Yeah.
after it's already so a Japanese author writing in English for a language that's already Sanskrit. So
Yeah.
a little phonetic slip up, that's forgivable.
Oh, definitely. Um,
Yeah.
this is our big question, I think, and one that I think a lot of people are going to be excited to know the answer to. Are there any plans to translate other Megami Tensei novels, including the other Quantum Devil Saga volumes?
Okay, so first of all, just to stress, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, I am a freelance translator. I'm not actually a Bento Books employee, but I know that they do intend to release the rest of the Quantum Devil Saga novels, so volumes 2 through 5. I don't know if they've actually struck like any sort of like deal that has like a timeline on that at all, but I know that that is their intent, is to at least finish out this series. As for the other MegaTen novels, those are actually done through different publishers, depending. Like I know at least one of them. I think it might be there's like a Nocturne related novel. I think that's actually published by like Famitsu, and then there's like some of the Persona novels are with another publisher. Um, but a lot of so I'm pretty sure that that's a rights issue. But I know that they want to get them and they want to release them. A lot of it's going to come down to how successful the Quantum Devil Saga novels are in the U.S. So,
You know what that means? Everyone buy
yeah,
one. Actually,
yes,
Yeah, everyone
buy
buy
two
one.
copies.
2.
Yeah.
Yes, that's great. That also helps me 'cause
Yes.
I do get royalties.
Everyone buy 3 then. Okay.
There you go.
Now that we have that settled, give them to your parents. There you go. They'll enjoy Quantum Devil Saga.
And
Yes.
like I said, nothing definite on the rest of the Quantum Devil Saga series, but if anyone from Bento's listening, if you like what I did with the first one, I'd be happy to tackle the rest.
Bento Books people listening to this, wink, wink, nudge,
Uh,
nudge. Kevin wants in. Yeah.
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Yeah.
I mean, I already started the first one, but I mean,
Yeah. Oh man. So hopefully that works out. So everyone listening to this, I mean, go support it.
yeah,
I mean, this is an awesome thing, and I'm sure a lot of you are going to want to read this. So if you want other
Yeah.
Mega 10 stuff like this, go buy Quantum Devil Saga 1 as soon as that comes out.
yeah. And if you're into the really really messed up,
Yeah.
world.
Oh
of
yeah, these are
Devil
these are
Saga.
MegaTen fans. Of course they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean there's some crazy stuff. Like there's some stuff in translate. I'm just like, oh my god, like, this is horrible. I'm like, what, like, how did this come out of this poor woman's mind?
Is there ever a point where you needed to stop and like get a glass of water or something? Just I can't deal with this.
I mean, it's certainly like just sort of like, okay, let me just like sit here and not think about this too much, because it's especially because like RPG combat is so sterilized. Okay, like pick options from a menu, and you have a little like preset animation of things hitting things, and then
Yeah.
the enemy disappears and it's dead. And then so you've got like okay, like Agni like goes up to this guy, like picks him up and literally rips him in half, and like bathes in his blood and entrails. It's like holy shit, you guys.
Oh
Oh
wow,
man, this sounds like my kind of novel. Oh man.
this sounds amazing.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So yeah, there you have it, people. Be sure to support this. We're definitely any of our listeners know we're gonna keep on top of this. So as soon as news about the release and stuff like that, where to buy it, all that type of stuff comes out, we're gonna be sure to cover it. So stay tuned for
Yeah,
more
we'll let
info
you
on
guys.
that.
A quick addendum, and I probably should have mentioned this when you were asking about how these differ from the games. Probably one of the bigger things is that obviously in the game you have Surf as your your kind of stereotypical JRPG silent protagonist.
Yeah.
And
yeah, he speaks now.
yeah, like he's the viewpoint character, and so he's got this very fleshed out personality, and he has agency, which is a refreshing thing to see in a hero for a story like this.
Yeah.
And that's actually something that the author herself remarked upon when it came time to write a video game scenario, where it's one of those things where okay, like she's used she was already a novelist. And it's like, okay, like normally when you're writing a story, you have to put everything in the hands like, okay, how is your main character going to handle this? They're sort of driving the story. And in a video game, you need to allow the player to be the one to do that. And so that kind of, that's a bit of a jarring shift, certainly as far as protagonist writing goes. And
It definitely comes up in the games a few times where you're supposed to be the leader of Embryon or Surface,
yeah,
but then you have a lot of the side characters making important decisions for you.
Without you.
Yeah, and it comes off a little weird. It's like, but he's the leader. Like,
He's the leader. You're supposed to talk to me.
yeah. Oh,
and
man.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a point of conflict because you've got the whole emergence of emotions that people never had before, and who's cool with this and who isn't.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Like it's like I said, like I was expecting going into this like okay, video game novelization, and it's really not. It's just it's almost more like you had video games based on books, only the books didn't come out for another 10 years.
Oh wow, were they really that late? I never knew that. I
Yeah,
assumed
no,
they were
like,
around the same time.
No, like these came out in I think 2011
Oh,
in Japan. Yeah, like
really?
it took a good 10 years for her to write these.
Oh man. Wow, that's interesting. Um, Man, everything you say is just making me more excited about this.
Yeah.
I guess we move on to we're in final stretch here. 5 more questions. What advice would you give to someone who wants to learn another language?
Okay, so once again, to come in with here's another thing about my professional resume that I didn't mention. I've actually been a professional teacher twice in my career as well. I have taught English and I have taught Japanese on a professional level. So language learning is something I'm very well acquainted with. The biggest piece of advice that I would have about if you want to learn another language, you really need to want to learn the language and you have to accept that it's going to be hard work. That doesn't mean it can't also be a hobby, but expect that it's not all going to be fun. It's going to take time. It's probably going to take money. You're going to need to do things like, consider, taking classes either at night school or at like, your university, buying books, hiring tutors. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a long process. I've had a lot of people just sort of offhandedly say, when I tell them I'm a Japanese translator, it's like, oh, like it's so lucky that you speak Japanese, and I'm thinking like lucky as if it's not something I worked years at becoming good at.
Like you randomly knew Japanese
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, hey.
Although when I go to Japan, that's sort of how they seem to think it. They're like, how can you speak Japanese? I'm like, well, I found a wizard spell book.
Yeah.
But no, so like you need to approach it seriously and with a certain amount of dedication. And you also have to realize that whether your motivation for learning the language is because, you want to get into something professionally, because you want to translate, because you want to, watch anime without needing subtitles, it's still, you still need to get a grounding in the language as the language is itself. In order for it to make sense on any level, especially between two languages as different as English and Japanese, you just need to accept that, first and foremost, you are learning how to communicate the way that people who aren't like you communicate. And it's not always going to be easy. And in fact, sometimes it'll be really difficult. There are certain concepts, especially like early on in Japanese, that just trying to wrap your head around them is really hard at first, especially if you only know English, just because there are some grammatical concepts that don't have an equivalent, and it can be really frustrating. And you just need to accept that, if you keep at it, you'll eventually break through that frustration. And it's really rewarding once you get there. It's cool to be able to speak multiple languages, I think.
Yeah. And also, something that my own Japanese teacher told me back in high school is that another good way to learn the language is to teach it to somebody else because you can retain you retain information better when you teach it to somebody else.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Especially because it forces you to think about what you're saying and how you're supposed to be saying it. Um, and it's also it's one of those, just any sort of repeated use. It's like any skill. The more you practice it, the better you're going to get at it. At least
Yeah.
that's the idea.
All right, that was good. Definitely learning another language is possibly one of the hardest things you can do in life. It definitely takes a lot of passion, I'd say.
Yes.
In middle school and high school, I had like a stint with like learning Spanish, just mostly for the credits and stuff, more than actual wanting to learn the language. But I just remember that two of my teachers specifically really um, really wanted us to grasp that learning a language just isn't the language part. It's the culture, it's the people, it's the
Mhm.
respect for just, places where the language originated from and just the history in general. Like it's a lot more than people think at first.
Yeah.
So
And in
definitely need to watch out for that when you're starting.
Yeah, and in the case of Japanese, I think a lot of the people who want to learn Japanese already have at least some
Yeah,
grasp
they
of
have
what
some
Japanese culture is
experience.
like. So that's keep heart in that. Like, hey, you already have a leg up. You already sort of get like, okay, like there's different levels of politeness. There's a honorific speech, and the way that you
There's
address your superiors is different than the way that you address your inferiors. And
Okay, so I guess a nice segue is or what advice would you give to someone who would like to translate media professionally?
this is actually a funny question because just last night I was having a conversation with somebody, kind of sardonically noting like I think there's like a rule that if you're somebody who translates Japanese song lyrics online that you're somebody who only kind of sort of knows Japanese, which isn't fair because there are plenty of people out there who do good song lyric translations, but I run into a lot of like stuff where people have like put translations into like YouTube videos and whatnot, and I'm like that's like no like that's not what that means. Like I see where you got that, but I'm like like
It's
it's like
wrong.
yeah,
why?
it's like what are you like a second semester Japanese student? Like I know you're excited, but come on. But no, I mean, sorry, I don't mean to discourage anyone. Actually, translating song lyrics is a great um, sort of exercise for um, practicing your skills. I know I certainly did it a lot when I was starting out, and a lot like I learned a lot of vocabulary through translating song lyrics on my own, just because I used to listen to a lot of Japanese music, and I'm like, okay, like I want to know what I'm listening to, and then so I'd be going through the lyric sheets and translating them, and then it was unfortunate sometimes because like, oh wow, like this song sounded really cool, and now that I translated it, kind of sucks. It's like wow, like this song is actually really lame. I wish I didn't know what it said.
I wish I remained blissfully ignorant.
Yeah, that's what happened with yeah, because I started out in college. I was one of those people where I would listen to a ton of Japanese music. I didn't speak a word of Japanese, but I could the the Evangelion theme song, "Cruel Angel's Thesis." Like
I
I
love
could
that song.
sing that. I could sing that whole song. I didn't understand a word of it at first, and then like years later, I heard it again. I'm like, oh my god, it's so weird. This is words now. like like I'm hearing them sing this, and it makes sense all of a sudden. And like before, it was just this kind of fun gibberish, and that's still a cool song.
This is a great song. Oh my god, I love that opening.
That's one
Definitely
of those
top five. And
that does not lose its magic when you speak Japanese.
oh man,
It's
that's
not like like the Gundam Wing songs or anything like that.
Oh
oh
my
man.
god.
Well, good old two mix was actually what got me into Japanese music. That's my secret confession.
Oh, now it's revealed to
Yes, now
all
everyone
the
knows.
COS listeners. Oh man.
Right.
Um, so
Yeah.
for
Street cred. But yeah, so if you want to translate media professionally, oh sorry, were you gonna follow up on that or?
oh no no, just carry on.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just realized I was getting off the point of the original question. Um, well, the first thing is you're probably going to need a few years of experience of making sure you actually know the language. Um, But the big thing is, figure out what sort of media you want to get into, and then look for companies or agencies that need people who can do that. And unlike a lot of other jobs where like, oh, you got to go in for an interview and they need to like make sure they like you. Language services are a thing where it's like, okay, they're going to give you something and they'd be like, here's something in like language X, translate this. And then you send it back, and either they see that you can translate it and do a good job, or you can't. It's a very simple, just straight up, confirmation of skills. Now, that's the short answer. The long answer is translation is much more than just making, one language into another. You need to take localization into account. So look at a lot of media that, gets a lot of praise for its translation and for its localization, and, compare that with the source material. And think, okay, like, what did they do with this? Okay, like what sort
Oh
of
man,
wording changes did they make? Why did they make them? What makes this work better in English than the original line did in Japanese? And like, try to
that
develop a
reminds
knack for that.
yeah, that reminds me a lot about Fire Emblem Awakening's localization. Um, they did a lot of First of all, they did a lot of name changes. Like, I know a character whose name was her name is Shershay in English, but in Japanese her name is Surge. There's a character named Azur in Japanese, but his name is Inigo in English. So they done a lot of name changes. They done a lot of changes to support conversations. They changed some aspects of characters' personalities to make them easier to understand in English. I think
Mm,
one and there was this one support conversation where it's the support conversation with, for those who know, it's a support combination with Crom and Sumiya, where Sumiya says, "Oh, hey Crom, I baked you a pie," and but in Japanese it's, "Hey Crom, I made a bento for you." And considering the setting of Fire Emblem is supposed to be like a medieval fantasy with dragons, wizards,
mm.
and gods and all that stuff, bento seems very out of place. So I can see why 8-4 decided to replace bento with pie.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I'm not gonna
um,
lie. Throughout this, like the past 30 seconds, I was trying to make like a bento books fun, but I couldn't. So
Uh, but and there's also the cultural context there, where like in
yeah,
English, somebody's saying like, "Oh, like I made you a lunchbox," like that doesn't like that just seems weird. But like, "Oh, like I baked you a pie," like
yeah,
we have a mental association with like baking things for people is like this like
yeah,
heartwarming sort of act. There's a certain cultural relevance to us as Westerners, and so yeah, I mean that's a
yeah.
great example.
There's also like the whole subject matter. It's supposed to be like a medieval thing and like
Yeah.
very Western, and the word, like the concept of bentos just seemed kind of out of place.
No,
um,
yeah, agreed.
this is something I actually just thought of as you were talking. There's a lot of. It seems like there's once in a while you hear of like a fan translator of whether it be like a game that they ROM hacked or a manga that they worked on or something, and then they get involved in the industry. Is there anything you want to speak on with that? Like, do you advise against fan stuff or?
No, not at all. I mean, and certainly, anything that you can do that will help you like hone your skills and cut your teeth on actual media translation, even if it's not for profit. Just going through the experience and seeing like what as I'm sure people who wait for all these ROM hacks to come out, translating a video game is a time-consuming thing, especially if you have another day job. Um, there's a lot of text that goes into something like that, and so making sure that that you can handle a project of that size, and that you can do it faithfully, that you can put out a product that other people will appreciate. And also, if you can point somebody, if you're trying to get like a job and say, hey, look, here's this thing I translated, like here's an example of something I've worked on, that's excellent to be able to directly show somebody something that you worked on.
All right.
I mean, my old resume before I got into professional translation, I certainly put down that I had done amateur translations. Yeah, I've done amateur translations of, comics and song lyrics and that. Like that was on my resume. Like, yeah, like I have translated stuff. Nobody paid me for it, but I did it. And now they do pay me for it, and it's awesome.
There you go. So moving on up, translation career. So, guess speaking more on translation stuff. Are there any common misconceptions about translating media you would like to address? Get it out of
Oh,
public
dear,
consciousness.
oh dear God, yes. God, the times I've like just been on NeoGAF and wanted to strangle people. It's like, why isn't this game out? Just like translate it and then put it in a box and sell it. And it's like, oh my God, like you have no idea what goes into the localization process and the time it would take me to educate you. You just wouldn't even read it. So one of the big things is that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. Like they're working out the rights to even release something can sometimes be a big legal battle, especially if it's something that involves voices.
Oh yeah, I mean, like,
Because
for one thing, Atlas is known for is that a lot of their localized games are English dub only, and that pisses off a lot of people who love their Japanese voices. One of their upcoming games, Conception 2, they confirmed it to have English dub only, and I looked at the thread on NeoGAF, and some guy was like, "Whoop, I'm not buying this game. No Japanese voices." I'm just like, "Are you kidding me?"
there are three things that people need to be aware of when it comes to that. One is that a lot of times the publishers will require that if you're going to have a foreign language vocal track, you also need to have the native language. You need to have the option for both. And a lot of times that's not going to fit on the actual media. And so you'll basically before it's like, okay, like either you just have the one or you can't have either. The other is that just because the Japanese media has already been recorded doesn't mean that when you release it in other territories that you can use it for free. You still have to pay the royalties to all of those voice actors because you're using their voices again in what is technically a different product. And a lot of times the cost that it is to, pay for these, voice acting rights is as much as it costs to record the game in English. Like it's an expensive proposition to have two fully vocalized language tracks in a game.
Okay.
There you have it.
Yeah, there you go. Everyone stop complaining and then thought crap.
People are still going to complain though.
Oh man, what's another game that there's a few games I know of where they have like the Japanese voice track is like DLC or something.
Dragon's Crown just did that, didn't they?
Lightning Returns has for like the first month of Lightning Returns, you'll get the Japanese voice tracks as free DLC.
Oh man, I thought I would. I just played the demo for that the other day and it was not great. I wish to remove that game from my mind, but you just brought it up. Thanks a lot. No,
I've been hearing bad things about the Lightning Returns demo.
It's not great. I didn't enjoy it, but what there's a lot of people going back to the DLC thing. There's a lot of people that I hear talking about the voice packs or whatever for the Japanese language, and then they're like, "Why isn't this free? This should be free. This should be included with the game." And it's like, there's probably a lot of cost that goes into that. Like, it's not just they can't just slap it on.
Oh, exactly, and that's the thing. A lot of times people complain about any sort of DLC. People talking about like day one DLC like is such bullshit, and it's like if you know what goes on behind the scenes of video game development, you would understand why it's not.
What are there any other misconceptions you wanna?
And there's
Oh,
no, sorry. Do you want to say something, Katsu? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
oh yeah, aren't there like certain voice acting agencies that just like that certain voice actors belong to don't want like their actors' voices to appear in other territories or something like that?
It's possible. I mean, I don't know how Japanese union rules work. Just because I've never had to like hire anyone through a Japanese voice acting union, which sounds strange. But no, I mean like very often the foreign language rights to audio tracks, like as I mentioned, they can be very expensive. I don't know if it's prohibited like period. I've never heard of that specifically.
Or do you rather like prices vary depending on voice actor, like how much work they've done, like makes their particular voice more expensive than that voice
Oh,
actor.
certainly for both English and Japanese voice actors, there are some like big name talents where they can afford to charge more.
Yeah, like Tomokazu Sugita. If you like his voice in an English localization, is his voice going to be more expensive than um say like in rather unknown Japanese voice actor like Tarusuke Shingaki will like say him and Sugita, is Shingaki's voice going to be less expensive than Sugita's voice?
Yeah, I mean it's entirely possible. And again, like because I know it's certainly I have much more experience with Western voice acting studios. I've actually done quite a bit of work with casting and direction for video game voice acting in the West. But here, I know we have unions and a lot of union scale. Like it pays across the board to make sure that everyone's getting like their fair cut, and it's not like, oh well, we're gonna pay you less because you're a nobody. But I mean, I've run into a couple of people that charge more than the standard, like like SAG, right, like Screen Actors Guild. That they'll be a little more expensive. As for like for sure whether they do that in Japan, I can't say 100%.
Oh, okay.
And I haven't worked in Japan like physically since 2002, so I'm a little behind the times on that. I mean, I've been back in the States for a long time now, and I've gone back over there for business trips, certainly, but I haven't like lived and worked there on a regular basis in a while. And I've certainly never been hands-on on an actual Japanese recording.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, that's one thing I can't speak to.
Okay.
Okay.
That was good though. But are there any other misconceptions you want to get out of the way
Yeah,
besides the one you listed?
yeah. A lot of times people sort of seem to think that any sort of change from the original Japanese, like if you're going to change something for context, you're like sullying the vision, and like that's simply not true. I mean, you're putting together a product, you're putting together something that it needs to sound good in English, and a lot of a lot of amateur fan translations are really good, and a lot of them are too slavishly devoted to the Japanese, I think, and they don't sound like natural English. And you have lines of dialogue where it's like, okay, nobody would say this sentence that way, and um, I see this a lot with anime fan subs, where there are some where it's like it feels like every 20 seconds there's like a translator's note that pops up on the screen
And you have to
explain
pause.
what's. Yeah, exactly.
I
It's
hate
one of those
that.
things.
I hate
So
No,
that.
you explain what's going on.
yeah, and you should hate that because it's
Yeah.
BS.
It is.
I know most of like the popular fan subgroups, like, well, not barring horrible subs since they just steal their stuff from Crunchyroll, but Kami, like stuff, guys like Kami and like Triple F and Hatsuyuki, they don't usually have those translator notes unless it's like something really complex or a really rare case that happens. But it's usually like something that not even the Japanese would understand unless there was some sort of translation note.
Yeah. Like my favorite example of this is of course the famous screen cap with the just according to Keikaku. And it's like the translators
Yeah.
Keikaku
I was about
means
to bring that
plan.
up.
Like I love that because it just exemplifies like, and I mean that is the joke where like because literally Keikaku just does mean plan, and like a lot of times like you'll see I'll be watching these fan subs, it's like translators not like trying to explain this term, and I just want to be like, look, I know that Japanese and English are different, but it's not like Japanese is like this magical language that like it conveys these beautiful ideas that like crummy English could never hope to attain. It's just like no, like
Filthy English.
it's just a different language. It's like oh like English doesn't have like a good word for this Japanese term. It's like yeah, and there are plenty of English terms that Japanese doesn't have a good word for. Like what's your point?
I remember trying to
You have to make it
look
sound
up
good.
the Japanese word for snark and snarky, and I could find.
Yeah, like slang in particular just doesn't like translate
Yeah.
well. Like then that's whenever people say like, "Oh, like you're a Japanese translator," I was like, "Oh, like how do you say such and such?" And like a bunch of the time, it's like some like English slang or like some sort of like portmanteau or word pun, and I'm just like, well, like, A, you wouldn't say that. It's like the first thing.
Oh man, yeah. So that's definitely that's really interesting. There's a lot of that. I mean, with fan subbing stuff, there's a reason that there's a lot of the bigger groups in terms of fan subs that have the larger followings and stuff. And a lot of times I notice they have the subtitles that flow with the voices a lot better. Whereas it feels like with a lot of like the worse fan subs out there, or just subtitles in general, it feels like almost like crunchy or like stiff is the word
Mhm.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to stress. I'm not knocking fan subbers. Like you said, there's a lot of like large fan subbing groups out there that do a really good job. I can
Yeah.
remember back in the 20th. When we got our fan subs, you'd got them on like fifth generation VHS, and it was just super grainy. We didn't have like this like torrent thing that you kids have nowadays. Making myself feel old. But no, like you said, that sort of like really clunky wording. I mean, for one, that's where a good editing pass comes in. And a lot of times, if you're going to do an editing pass, sometimes it helps to have it just be edited by somebody who doesn't even speak Japanese, because they're not going to be biased by what the original language was. It's like okay, like I get what you're trying to say in English. Let me just write that in better English, and that makes for a better subtitle than something that is like too slavishly devoted to the Japanese wording.
Yeah.
There you go.
Because it's just a matter of fact that again, they're different languages. They will phrase things differently in Japanese that sounds fine in Japanese, but if you use that same wording in English, it just doesn't sound right.
It's Google Translate syndrome.
Oh God,
Yeah.
The way that Google Translate works, like the way its translation engine parses, it's actually getting worse at translating Japanese as time goes on. It's
Not
hilarious.
bad.
Oh man, that's good.
It's
Oh,
great. It's great because it's job security for me. A robot cannot do my job for me.
there you go. Oh man, with you two have probably heard of this, or like those programs that'll run a sentence through Google Translate 72 times or whatever
Oh,
throughout.
translation party.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
like there's a bunch of them, but they always end up
Translation
hilarious.
aggregator.
Yeah, they always end up hilarious and just nothing like the original. I love those.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so I guess we'll move on. That was very informative. That was good. What is your favorite translation or
Yes.
localization of a piece of Japanese media, official or unofficial?
Ooh, this is a good one.
Be sure
Uh,
if there's more than one, you feel free to list them all
I
off.
I am a huge fan of, especially of the original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. I think the localization of the Phoenix Wright games is phenomenal. I think they did a really good job of maintaining tone and feel, keeping puns intact, and really just doing a good job of establishing character dialogue and tone in a way that was very lifelike and very enjoyable. And I know a lot of people complain like, oh, like, well, they changed it from being set in Japan to being set somewhere else, and it's like, well, it's imaginary courtroom world where the laws are complete BS. Like, where does it matter where it's specifically set? Um, Actually, I remember quite liking the localization in Persona 3. When I played through that, that was fun. I think that they clearly had fun with that one, which is good
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
it's good to have fun with what you're doing. Um, I heard the localization of Persona 4 was even better. I just never got around to actually playing that.
Yeah. It was one of the like it's considered one of the best localizations ever.
That's what I hear. I mean, and that right there should be reason enough for me to check it out.
Yeah.
That and I want to bump my MegaTen street cred. So if I do wind up translating more of these books and you have me back on again, I can be like, oh God, I can play all these games, you guys. I can party with the cool kids now.
There you go. You
Yeah.
can say that you've beaten Persona 4 when I still haven't. Everyone makes fun of me for that. So, uh, any others or just those two stick out?
Let me think. And I apologize. I've been trying to think in the back of my mind, but I keep getting you know off into industry
Fun chat.
industry fun times where I get like all vehement and
This is your time.
This is it's my time to shine. And now, God, I feel like it's such a So I know we mentioned Final Fantasy X earlier. I think that was another good job because that was weird too because you had the whole like cipher language thing going on, which I can only imagine that was
Oh,
a
the
pain
Albed.
to figure out. Yeah,
Oh,
like to have
jeez.
that work between
Localizing the
Japanese
Albed,
and
I have
English.
no idea how that worked.
Yeah, like I know it works differently in the Japanese, but like in the English, it's 1-to-1 for each letter,
Yeah.
and in like Japanese, it's like several different syllables for each primer, just because we
Oh,
have
jeez.
fewer letters than they do.
Oh man, that must be that must have been fun. I never bothered to do those. Like it just seemed like so much work. All the Albed stuff, just
See, this is another reason I try not to play more RPGs because I'm such like a completionist, and like I'll get like obsessed with like one. It's like I've actually had to break my urge to do 100% completion, and just like let myself enjoy a game for once because like it would get to one of these points where like I wouldn't finish games because I'm like, no, I can't leave this area until I gone back through and like I did it with
Dodge lightning 200
like did you?
times.
Oh, I did that too.
jeez.
That was BS. that and the chocobo race to get Tidus.
Oh, the Chocobo race wasn't that bad, but
Oh
it
yes,
was like
it
the
was.
lightning dodge.
With the
No, it
birds.
wasn't.
Those
With the birds, you
those
had.
birds were BS.
It
I
wasn't
tried.
that.
I tried
Okay,
for
I might be.
hours to get that thing.
I was like probably like 8 years old or 9 when I did
Well, there you
that, and
have
I
it.
managed to do it just fine. But
Oh my
like the
God.
lightning dodges, it was impossible. I didn't have the patience.
Oh God, I guess I was already an old man and didn't have the reflexes.
If going into this, someone would have told me that there would be a debate over the Chocobo racing of Final Fantasy X, I would have called them a liar. But
We're in the wrong series entirely. What are we doing?
Yeah, what are we doing?
no,
Sorry to muck up your podcast. No,
that's awesome. No, but with completionist stuff, yeah, I can definitely, especially with MegaTen, that's intense. Like
That's
Shin
hard.
Megami Tensei 4 has a quest system, and there's a bunch of obscure quests and stuff to get, and I made sure to do as many of them as possible, and I have like an over 100-hour save file, and then when you combine in the fact that I still haven't even bothered touching New Game Plus, like they're long games.
There's
Okay.
this one quest in Shin Megami Tensei 4 that you can't complete if you choose Law or Chaos. You have to go neutral to complete it.
Oh man.
I remember I started playing Eternal Sonata, and I got maybe like 8 or 10 hours into it, and there was this one thing where there was clearly some side quest going on that like you had to do, and I was trying to figure it out, and I was just racking my brain. I'm like, what do I do? Like, how do I solve this thing? So like I cracked and I looked on GameFAQs. It's like, oh, like you actually can't do this until you come through again on New Game Plus. I'm like, nope, I'm done. I'm like, F this game. Like, do not dangle things in front of me that I am not allowed to do until I've already played your game. And I'm like, screw this.
That oh man, that really bothers me with a lot of stuff, and I really think it hurts the game experience in some games. Like the main offender, and this is the one I always bring up, is Prince of Persia: Warrior Within. Um,
Oh wow.
and if I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, but basically to get the true or the good ending of the game, you need to get the special sword that can kill the final boss. And to get that special sword, you need to get every life upgrade in the game, and they're always in these convoluted hidden areas that you would never notice unless you were using a guide. And I remember I was like towards the end of the game and I'm like, "Oh crap, I'm missing one." And I looked and I couldn't go back and get it. Like the area was locked already. So I felt like, "Wow, I just played through this game and because I didn't notice that one area, I got the bad ending and I was so pissed off and I never beat that game." But oh man, yeah,
It's
fun
like
time.
trying to get the good ending to Valkyrie Profile. Which
Oh
like
man,
yeah,
Valkyrie
that's a
Profile.
trip and a half.
Yeah, I never beat Valkyrie Profile because of that. I was like, nope.
Okay.
Oh, so I thought of another localization that I think is a really good job was The World Ends with You.
Oh,
A very, very Japanese-based setting with a lot of culturally specific things. Phenomenal job bringing that over in English. I think they did.
oh man, I
That was
still
a
need
fun
to
game too.
play more of that. I started it and It's just so crazy as soon as you get into it, and
Is
it's like the hell's going on, but I love it. So
the learning curve in that game is really weird, but I had a lot of fun with it.
I know a
Yeah, The
lot of
World
people
Ends
that
With You
love
is a
that game.
really great game. People are clamoring for a sequel. That Square Enix is just gonna probably just
Put
push
on
to mobile.
iOS. No.
Yeah, on iOS.
Um,
Well, the control scheme would work on iOS.
yeah, they,
Yeah,
they
it
have
would.
the port for the first game on iOS already, and it seemed to be a lot of people liked it apparently.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I
So
would want to play it on an iPad and not an iPhone. I think an iPhone would be a little bit too small, but
yeah, definitely. Um, okay, and then getting to the last stretch here. What projects will you be working on in the near future? Anything you can talk about, or?
I can say that my next project after I'm done with first volume of Quantum Devil Saga here is going to be another video game.
Ooh.
I can't say what it is, but because I don't think it's been announced yet.
Oh, okay.
I will tease you and say that it is a well-known IP from Japan that has a fairly large following in the U.S. as
Oh.
well. Unfortunately, if I say any more, like I actually really will get in trouble with my
Okay,
NDA.
yeah. That's
Okay. Yeah.
understandable.
I'll just say that I'm not saying who it's for. I'm not saying who I'm translating it for. It's just,
Okay,
it is it
that's
is
fair.
it is something that I'm sure plenty of your listeners know about.
Okay, that's awesome. Um,
And then
Ooh.
hopefully I'll be doing more stuff for novels in the future too. I don't have anything definite lined up, but I have a few things potentially lined up. Fingers crossed. Anyway.
hopefully, Quantum Devil Saga volumes 2 through 5.
Hey, that'd be great. I would do them. I would love to do them.
Oh man, that'd
It'd
be
take
tons
a
of fun.
long time, but I
Okay,
would do it. If you told me like right now, like, hey, you have to decide now, like, do you want to commit to doing these next 4 books? I'd probably say yes.
that's good. That's good. Got dedication.
Like I said, like, I feel like a sense of ownership over this now. It's like part of it belongs to me, and it doesn't. It belongs to you, Godai, and it belongs to the fans. But
But you're the one who's bringing it to us, so that's awesome.
yeah, my name will be on the
Yes.
cover.
Yes, that's good. Then is there anything you want to plug? Social media projects you're working on that you can talk about?
So I did mention that I have some books of my own out already. If you just like look for my name, you can find those online. It's just some niche sci-fi stuff. Although I think if people who are into MegaTen, I think probably the ones they would be most interested is like I have a book called The Seventh Chakra, which one of the best reviews I saw of that once they said it was like a cross between like Watership Down meets Shadowrun. If that's a reference that makes sense to anyone but me.
Oh
Uh,
man.
no, so like I have these first 2 novels that sort of take place in this like animal person world where I've sort of built this society where there's this weird like religious order that like their whole thing is like like cross species harmony, but then you've got like this weird like kind of like Opus Dei with guns. Going on. And then the other one, I have a book. It's called Summerhill, and that one's people have likened that one sort of to Doctor Who. My jokingly silly but still technically accurate description of that one is that this amnesiac dog alien who can make plants grow with his mind and a waitress from New Zealand who is on the run from the space police go on these dimension hopping adventures through time and space.
Sounds like a trip.
That was a little bit more cheerful and less dark and grim than Quantum Devil Saga.
There's no one that's ripping people in half over their head and being covered with blood.
No, although Seventh Chakra gets kind of violent. You have people like getting their heads blown off every so many number of pages, and neck
That's
snapping,
fun
and
though.
people falling off of buildings. Like Shadowrun stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
So, do you have I don't know if you referenced your Twitter at all, or
Oh yes, my Twitter is just at Kevin Frane, which the name will probably be spelled in the notes of the podcast.
oh yeah, we'll link to it. So, um,
Yay.
there you go.
And as we were playfully playing Twitter tag in the week leading up to this podcast, where
Oh
it's like
yeah, I
both
was like, Hey, I saw you
Yeah.
tweet something. Favorite. Yeah.
Look, I was like, I got this special something coming up. Might interest you.
Yeah. And then I was
So
getting like,
I've been,
guys
I
like
was super
puppy.
bummed that I couldn't do this earlier because I know you wanted to do it last week, and I'm like, oh, like, I really want to do this now too, but like I'm gonna be out of town. So
Yeah, it's all good.
this whole week I've been
Priorities.
like, oh yeah, you gotta have your priorities.
Oh man, this is a lot of fun though. This is definitely. I'm sure the fans are gonna love this one. So
Yes.
everyone,
So
stay tuned for Quantum Devil Saga and check out Kevin Frane's other stuff. A lot of fun this podcast. Thanks a lot, guys. I think we're good for now, unless anyone wants to bring up anything.
Nah, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm like looking at like my resume here. I'm like, is there anything like out there that people would nah, probably good. I
Okay.
will say for anyone who does look through my career resume for all the games I've translated. There are some games out there. Like again, strictly speaking, I worked in localization. So if I worked on a game where like the game itself sucked, that was not my fault. I'm not saying that I'm specifically talking about Shadow the Hedgehog or Sonic 2006.
Oh.
Oh my God!
I'm just
That's
saying
awesome.
my name might be in the credits somewhere, but I'm just a localization guy.
You weren't the one that decided to give Shadow the ability to use guns and motorcycles. All right.
I was not.
There you go.
I also was not. So Shadow the Hedgehog. I did not translate the main cutscenes, so I cannot take credit for where's the fourth damn Chaos Emerald. So that was not me.
What was the falling down the pit? Damn, not here. Was that you?
I don't think so.
Okay. That's all in good fun. That's awesome. So yeah,
That,
thanks a lot for being on. It was a lot of fun.
that was one of those
Yes.
things where when I was working with Sonic Team on the Sonic games, they were like, hey, like we want you to translate these, and then like we're gonna give it to like our Sonic continuity person to make sure that everyone sounds like they're in character. And, like I was a huge Sonic fan before I even worked for Sega, and so like I did these translations, like oh, like this actually already sounds really good. And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of familiar with the characters already. Like I kind of know what they sound like.
Oh man. Well, I think
So
this.
did either of you play Sonic Rush Adventure? I'm just curious.
No, but I have a friend that did and loved it. So
Okay, that was a really fun game. But
that was the DS one, right?
that was yes, that was one of the DS ones. There were a couple of ones, but no, one of the characters in there, she was localized to be Australian, and egregiously so. And I will say that I guess that is technically all on me. That might have been my call, but she never really showed up again or anything after that. I don't think people liked her very much.
That's a shame.
No, but it's like what is with because I know I have Australian friends and they're like that like we don't talk like this, yeah. And I'm like no, but like that's the point.
Oh
Like that
man.
wasn't an accident. Like it's supposed to be like that. It's like oh,
Oh man.
parody succeeding because nobody gets the joke.
There you go.
It's just as anyone out there, if there are any Australian listeners out there, I promise I love you guys. You guys are great too. You have a good sense of humor.
See, what Kevin did is he finished the translation or the localization for that character, and then he said that went all according to Keikaku, and an asterisk appeared above his head that said, "Note: Keikaku means plan," or whatever.
Yes.
Oh god.
There we go.
Now part of me wants to like go through my Quantum Devil Saga manuscript and like just back translate everything and like just, every page will have footnotes.
There you go. Just leave some words untranslated, and
So
man.
I'm just curious if I can ask a question of you guys because I think this is worth talking about just in case anyone out there. So how in the sort of greater rubric of the wide MegaTen universe, how are the Digital Devil Saga games regarded amongst those?
Very loved.
Best of the best.
Well, Katsu here is like a major fanboy for the games, so
Okay.
Yes.
yeah, they're really well loved. It was definitely people didn't really sadly start noticing MegaTen until the PS2 games started coming out, and Digital Devil Saga was right up there in terms of PS2 releases. So they definitely got a lot of people into it, and they're definitely loved by the fan base because they're so unique.
Yeah, I remember hearing a lot about them when they were out, but that was like right at like towards like when I was getting into the industry, and like I would never have had time to have played them when they came out. Unfortunately, I definitely want to play through them now, for
Um,
obvious reasons.
I think they're both fairly short too, which is nice. So
Yeah.
I hear they're much less punishing than other MegaTen. Oh, well, somewhat less punishing.
yeah, I don't
MegaTen
know. It's weird
has a
because
reputation for not being easy.
I've heard from people on message boards that 2 is like hard, but then everyone that I personally talk to says that 1 and 2 are both pretty easy. So I have no clue. I
Except
haven't
that
gotten.
one certain boss in Digital Devil Saga 2, who shall not be
Oh,
named.
I think
Oh.
I know which one you mean too. I remember I was watching like boss fights from the Digital Devil Saga series on YouTube, and then I was like, oh, like this one doesn't seem that bad. I'm like, oh, that's part 1 of 6.
Oh,
I'm
was
like,
that the
oh
Demi
my.
Fiend boss by any chance?
Yes, it was.
Oh man, yeah. There's a bonus boss in the first game called the Demi Fiend, who is actually the protagonist of Nocturne.
Yeah, and I like that they play the Nocturne battle theme when you
Yes,
fight too.
and
Yeah.
it's the most ridiculously bullshit boss fight thing that's ever been created in a video game, and like no one can beat him. It's hilarious.
Yes, I
Luckily he's a bonus boss.
yeah that's
It was.
yeah the bonus bosses in JRPGs are always the ones that you gotta look out for.
Oh man.
Like, I remember like in like Final Fantasy VII, you had like the weapons, and it was just like, oh god.
Oh, there's the one that was timed. That was
Uh,
terrible.
I think
Oh,
they
that one
both.
was awful.
I think Ruby and Emerald were both timed, weren't they?
Oh, I don't remember. It's
Were
been
they?
forever. Um, that could be. I'm not. I can't remember. I haven't played those games since I was young. Oh
So,
man.
but so Katsu, question for you then, since you're apparently big into Digital Double Saga, do you have a favorite character?
I like all of the main cast.
Yeah.
There isn't one that I particularly despise.
All right, that's good. That's good. Yeah, it's a fun little group of characters.
Yeah.
Uh,
From
I
what
think
I've
I
played,
think
I really like them too. I haven't gotten much into it, but I can definitely see where each of their personality traits are kind of coming through. Like I'm at that point, I guess you could say. So I'm
yeah.
definitely, man, I really need to get to playing those.
I have a soft spot for Argilla. I think. Um, my sort of like little mental mantra while translating this is it's never a good day to be Argilla. Poor girl, like she's always having the worst day. It's like, oh, like nothing good ever happens to you, and then when good things do happen, something even worse happens immediately after. It's like, oh, you poor thing. And
I like Heat just because he's a dick for being like the sake of being a dick a lot of times. I
oh
enjoy
god,
that
it's
about
it's
him.
so funny because like he's like the only person like at the beginning who just gets it. He's like, okay, it's like, well, all right, fucked up shit happened, and like, well, we just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And people are like, how can you just deal with this? And he's like, well, like, can we change it? No. All right, let's move on. It's kind of
Oh,
hilarious like that. Uh,
oh
I
man.
enjoy writing Gale. Gale is fun to write.
Gale is cool.
Yeah, they get into a lot of more background as to like what Gale's deal is. They explain why he wears a hood.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ooh,
I don't
mystery spoiler.
I
I'm
don't
sure
think they do
everyone
that
was
these
asking
days.
that question. I'm sure everyone was wondering, like, wait, why does one guy wear a hood? But no, they
Many a
actually.
fan fiction was written about the hood, I'm sure.
Yes.
Oh man.
Yeah, they also. This is the first time I've ever seen anything that sort of has that like Japanese media like anime hair thing that bothers to like lampshade the fact that that's weird.
Oh really?
Yeah, well, because
Yeah.
they're going out on this like one infiltration mission in like the junkyard where it's all like gray and drab and ruins. It's like well, like, and they have to wear like camouflage ponchos because otherwise like a girl with bright pink hair is going to stand out against everything. And I'm like, huh? I'm like, I think it's the first time I've ever seen that acknowledged.
I mean, I think they kind of imply why that is in the games, but yeah, they never really bring it up like that. I don't think that's
Oh
like
yeah, they do, but they didn't quite. Yeah,
have as
I don't
much
want to
fun.
spoil what the big surprise is for people who haven't experienced digital, because it is a big switch between Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2. It's just kind of like,
Oh,
oh,
definitely.
Yeah.
it's so funny because like it's at a point now where like everyone knows about the surprise. Like
Yeah.
everyone knows, and it's like, wow, that's amazing.
Everyone, I think, as TV tropes would call it, it's a late arrival spoiler.
Yes. Yeah, or it was his sled, that type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Um I don't know if actually let's I was gonna ask if that reoccurs in the novels, but I get it might be more fun if we don't let people know, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I did say earlier that Volume 1 here covers about half of Digital Devil Saga 1. And according to the author's own notes, it is a 3-part story told across 5 volumes.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
like I said, I have actually not read the end of the series myself. I am curious to see. Like I said, there's stuff that happens toward the ends of Part 1 where it definitely diverges from the games pretty heavily.
Okay.
So we'll have to see.
Man.
Hmm.
So think we can wrap it up. So
Oh yes.
thank you so much, Kevin, for being on. This
Oh,
was
thank you for having me. I was
Yes. Thanks a lot.
really excited to be asked to do this.
it was definitely an honor working with you and the Alex from Bento Books who helped get this together so that we could record. A lot of fun, Alex. If you ever want to be on, because
Yes.
you can be on it because there's a little email exchange there. So the offer is always open for either of you to return, or well, for you to return or Alex to come on here and talk about Bento Books a little bit. So thanks a lot. A lot of fun. See you guys next time.
Hey, I mean, if maybe after the book comes out, if people want to
I-
like write in and ask questions specifically, I'd be happy to come back.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, we might need to plan that.
They're like, why did you do this? Be like, oh, leave me alone.
why why didn't you have a translation note on page 137? Uh,
I'm looking at what happens on page 137. Hold on. At the book here. Oh, okay. That's a. Yeah, that's a good
Oh man.
actually.
actually, before we go, how many pages is it so far?
The translation?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's hard. I mean, I have how many pages. Okay, so this is another thing for people who are in the writing business. We actually do things by word count more than page count.
Okay.
It's about 94,000 words, which is pretty good size for like your standard paperback novel. I mean, in Word, it's about 140 pages, but I mean that's going to translate into probably close to. I mean, it depends on what size and what font they use for the book.
Okay.
But it'd be around the 300 page range. Like it is a full size book.
Okay.
Certainly, it is definitely a novel.
That'll be refreshing because I was just worried because I'm a big Stephen King fan and he puts out books that are thousands of pages and oh, it was
Oh yeah, you're talking like 300,000 words in a Stephen King book, easy.
yeah, like oh man, I'm looking to go back through his Tower series because I just love those books and not gonna lie, not looking forward to reading through like the fourth and fifth books in particular because just so long. But yeah, being a university student's fun.
Actually, I'm looking at like word count comparisons here so that I can give people an idea of. So actually, yeah. You figure each of the books in the Hunger Games is around 100,000 words, and this is around 100,000 words, so about that size. I mean,
Okay, that's reasonable size.
yeah, I picked something that was recent and relevant, and that maybe some people there have read. So I mean, yeah, they're not like short.
Okay,
Okay.
so looks like that's it. Thanks a lot, guys. Stay tuned. For any of the newcomers we may get from this, any Digital Devil Saga fans that don't know, we are a Megami Tensei podcast that usually updates weekly, not always weekly, but we try and keep a consistent rate. So be sure to stay tuned for more Cathedral of Shadows stuff, and be sure to pick up Quantum Devil Saga when that comes out.
Yes.
You'll be paying my rent. It's cool.
Yeah, like we said, buy 3 copies. All right, think that's it.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.